Well, hello there.
Hello, Boo.
Friends,
Boo.
lovers, and excuse the technical challenges. I just got to make sure we really are online on both YouTube, there we are, and Facebook, there we are. You know, it seems every 3 months or so, Facebook just throws us out and says, you've got to sign in all over again. You've got to reset up the connections, the channels, the restream links, all that good stuff. But you know what? Whatevs. We're here. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Happy Sunday, friends, lovers. And thank you for joining us. This is 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. I am Robert Nasir. I am joined by Amy Nasir in the adorable, adorable hat.
Wahahaha.
Love, love, love that.
It was the ghosts, by the way.
The ghosts, that's
Yes.
it. It's the Halloween. You know, I should have brought up the Halloween theme song because I would normally have saved this, you know, for next week when we have Halloween.
There you go. So spooky.
Yes, that's right. It's 5 minutes with, well, anyway, enough of that fun because we have things to talk about. We have things to do. We have promises to keep. Today is Sunday, October 24th, 2021, the 297th day of 2021. 2021, this, your best year yet. I know, it's autumn blues. A few people out there aren't feeling like this is your best year yet. Look back through your journal, your diary, your photo album, your Facebook wall, wherever it is you journalize your life. You will be surprised how many good things are out there. That's what I did recently, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we did all that stuff? It doesn't feel like it in 2021 that we went to New Orleans for 7 days and did all the amazing things that one could possibly want to do.
We did.
Staying in the French Quarter in New Orleans, but we did. It doesn't seem like we went to Austin, Texas, and met some of the coolest people you would ever want to meet and started a dialogue with some of them that continues to this day. It doesn't seem like we did all the traveling, all the looking around, all the adventures, all of the bike riding. I turned in my 200 miles for the month today. It's all gravy from here on out. That means, what does that mean? It's the 10th month, so have I hit? Oh, that's right, because of my finger accident, my damage to my finger, broken finger, I am running a little late, but I will get 2,000 miles by the end of the year if I keep it up. It just doesn't seem like 2021 had all that stuff. I'm guessing for you, just like for me, it did have all that stuff. You just need to look back and see it all. This is the 297th day of the year, 68 years. Wow, where did that come from? 68 days left.
You're possessed.
To make this your best year yet. 68 days. 68 days is a long time. It's a lot of time. You can perform miracles, and you will in 68 days. We have 61 days until Christmas, and only 7 days.
Oh, 7 days.
1 week until Halloween.
All Hallows Eve.
Yikes.
All Hallows Evening.
Well, yesterday we did. Amy and I did put out a whole bunch more of our Halloween, as we promised on the last show. Of course, yesterday's kind of last minute, but they are out there on our front lawn. If anybody drives by this part of Motown, you will see those decorations. It's not extreme, it's just very charming.
It's really charming. I'll have pictures posted up on our Facebook group, 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir.
And if you clap your hands, or if you're just loud enough, our flying ghost will fly past you as you walk up to the front door.
Like that.
So much good stuff. On this date, October 24th, I mentioned the week before, we were talking about bad guys and how bad guys actually don't win out in the end. And I gave Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid as an example. That film came out on this date, October 24th, 1960. It's the strangest thing, because I'm sure I said last week, yeah, it came out in the early 70s. It turns out it was 1969.
Well.
Yeah, October 24th, 1969, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid released. Great movie. But again, kind of gives you that sense that evil is more fun than virtue. We talked about that. Also, on this date, October 24th, 1901. 1901, so 99 years ago, right? We keep having that weird millennia issue where, like,
99 years ago.
1901 was actually 120 years ago. Annie Edison Taylor went over Niagara Falls in a barrel.
Right.
Annie Taylor was the first person to successfully take the plunge over Niagara Falls in a barrel. Her husband died in the Civil War, and the New York-born Taylor moved all over the U.S. before settling in Bay City, Michigan, just north of where we are broadcasting from right now. Around 1898, and in July of 1901, while reading an article about the Pan American Exhibition in Buffalo, she learned of the growing popularity of the two enormous waterfalls located on the border of upstate New York and Canada. Strapped for cash and seeking fame, Taylor came up with the perfect attention-getting stunt. She would go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. Stories linked to in the notes, but she did actually make it through her battering 20-minute journey. What's fun about that for me? Why do I care about that? About 10 different reasons, one of which is we've been watching on television. You know, we tend to binge. We don't spend a lot of time on television, but when we do, we tend to get into whatever we're getting into. We're still watching Murdoch mysteries.
Yes. So many seasons.
Canadian murder mysteries.
Yes, from the turn of last century. And it's great.
And it's funny because they're a little goofy in that there's all sorts of anachronisms. There are things that don't belong in 1899, or I guess we're up to 1900. I guess in theory we must be up to 1901 because Annie Edison Taylor makes an appearance and becomes a plot point in one of the episodes. Couldn't resist bringing that up. If you like murder mysteries, but lighthearted murder mysteries, Murdoch mysteries, definitely a good way to go. We know Jennifer's watching them out there with us, although I think she's watching them in a more interesting order than we are. Might be wise. Some of them are awfully silly, which, of course, you know we love. Also, on this date in 2003, October 24th, 2003, was the final flight of the Concorde SST, the Concorde Supersonic Transport, the supersonic airplane. 20 of these airplanes were built. Something like 100 of them were ordered. Most of the orders weren't fulfilled. 18 of them are still around in good condition and are on display in various museums. Why do I bring up the final flight of the Concorde? We're talking about hope today. Isn't that a little bit of a downer? But here's the thing. Boom Supersonic.
Oh,
Boom
yes.
Supersonic and Blake Scholl, they're out there designing the next generation of supersonic airplanes. If you're an objectivist or a fan of Ayn Rand, you're probably aware of Blake Scholl and what he is doing. In fact, this year on June 3rd, they received an order for 15 of these supersonic aircraft from United Airlines. They are on their way. They are going to make supersonic transport a thing again. You will be able to go from New York to London in a reasonable amount of time. You'll be able to go from New York to Australia without spending 18 hours in the air and stopping for fuel and whatever's involved in that kind of trip.
That's faster than ghost travel, as a matter of fact.
It's faster. I don't know if it's as charming as ghost travel. That's very sweet. Those of you watching the podcast later, are rather not watching but listening, Amy does have the charming ghost mug to go along with her charming witch's hat.
It's so beautiful.
It really is. So Boom Supersonic is designing and setting up to build supersonic aircraft. They're already working on those test planes. Also on this date, October 24th, 1861. 1861, so 160 years ago. I always think of the 1800s as candles, like there was no electricity. And I have to remind myself, no, they didn't have a good working light bulb, but they did have electricity. In fact, later in the century, they had arc lamps, these super bright lamps that worked by two pieces of carbon rod pointed at each other. And there's this big arc, this spark between them that was super bright. We still use those up until contemporary times for aircraft lights. Those lights you see sometimes, discos, bars, clubs will use them out front to shine the lights in the sky. Those were around in the 1800s. Well, on this date, 1861, Western Union first transcontinental telegraph line. Those of you watching the Murdoch mysteries will know the importance of that, but also I've been reading, in the subject, what are we listening to? I'm not listening, but I'm rereading Calumet K.
Oh, yeah.
By Merwin and Webster. And the telegraph plays an important role in that story. So if you get on board with the reading group that's going to be rereading Calumet K, you will have some fun with that. Moving on. Birthdays. Whose birthday is it? Well, on this date, Emmerich Kalman was born, the Hungarian composer. Folks who watched Leonard Peikoff's recent operetta talk. are familiar with him as the composer of both Countess Maritza and the circus princess Zirkusprinzessin. I should learn German before I even try to play with these pronunciations.
Come on, you're half German.
I am half German,
this.
you would think. Yes, well, the other half seems to take control sometimes. Also, happy birthday, someone who is still with us, to Kevin Kline.
Wow.
Born this date, 1947. That makes him 74 years old. Kevin Kline. And why do we care about that? Well, two reasons. One is Kevin Kline's breakout role was in the film, a very tragic film, Sophie's Choice.
Oh, right.
And the book and eventually the movie became so popular that an unsolvable dilemma is now referred to as a Sophie's Choice. When all of the options are bad, all of the options are tragic. Take, for example, the trolley problem, which came up again on Facebook recently when people said, well, what would Ayn Rand do? Faced with a trolley problem where her husband is tied to the tracks and she can pull a lever that will kill 1,000 innocent people instead of her husband. Most of the answers, probably 90% of them, all of the answers except Amy's, were foolish and absurd.
Yes,
but
mine was not foolish.
what they didn't properly respect was this was a Sophie's Choice.
Yeah.
This was an unsolvable dilemma. That film was going to have a tragic ending no matter what choice was made. I won't even describe the plot. It's terribly tragic. But
Yeah.
there are circumstances where there are no good answers. And read The Ethics of Emergencies for how best to handle that. But
Yeah. Yeah, but the bottom line of it, wisdom and philosophy should not be servicing trolley problems. They should be actually applied to your everyday life.
Yes.
And that is not, the choice of two different horrifying tragedies is not something that you're going to find in your everyday life.
nor should it be what
Yeah.
you're judged on.
Right.
We did talk about heroism recently. And yes, certainly people can rise to it. They can be heroes instead of cowards. But moral blame doesn't fall to the person faced with that choice.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I like celebrating Calvin Kline's birthday, though, is not so much for the films like Sophie's Choice, but the lighthearted stuff. Because everybody knows Amy and I like lighthearted stuff. So A Fish Called Wanda, or the charming, even if disposable film French Kiss, which I still like watching.
Yeah, it's nice.
Super sweet. So happy birthday to Kevin Kline. One more. Just one more thing we celebrate on this day, October 24th. Happy Food Day.
Is this when food came into existence?
Yes, when food was invented back in...
In 158,028.
Well, depending on your religious beliefs,
BCE.
Food was invented on the third day or something like that. But there's an irony here. Food came from the Center for Science and the Public Interest, Food Day, because Center for Science and the Public Interest, started by, among others, Ralph Nader, decided we needed a day to celebrate and to focus on food availability around the world. As you know, without even knowing it, I am not a fan of the Center for Science and the Public Interest. Whatever good they've done is marred by their politics. But we'll set all that aside for a moment. It is Happy Food Day. It is a day to look at the fact that people don't starve as much as they used to. In fact, not only do they not starve as much as they used to, they eat healthier than they used to.
Yeah.
There are some exceptions to that. We have the obesity epidemic in America. Not as bad as it was 20 years ago, but it's still a thing. We have so much food and also access to so much inexpensive and luxurious food. I was going to say crappy food, but we have sweets, indulgences. We have so much food. We don't starve anymore. The biggest problem is, how do I lose weight? Do a Google search for how do I lose weight. Compare that to how do I gain weight? I know there are people looking out there to put on the pounds, but it's funny to read like old muscle magazines or even comic books that had the Muscle Man advertisements in it.
Right.
Stop being a skinny,
same
put on some pounds. And for girls.
Same for women, 1920s or so.
Yeah, how can I put on some pounds?
How can you become more voluptuous and attractive to the men?
Men aren't attracted to skinny women. I think that all changed in the late 60s with Twiggy and Goldie Hawn, and that became somehow a good thing. But it is Happy Food Day, a day, and that's going to relate to what we have to talk about today, because I promised on Thursday, our show, Life on Earth, with the Ayn Rand Center UK's channel, that I would give you a preview and a promise in regard to the subject of hope. Mm-hmm. And if you think this subject isn't for you, then you need hope and change. Or rather, you need to change your attitude on hope.
Can we change that phrase?
Hope and change?
This
is a time for hope and change.
Throw it away.
So join our hope-inspired tea party.
Yes.
I'm not going to repeat everything I said on Thursday because some of you were there, but I'm going to say just enough to get us into the topic. Definitions are crucial to this discussion. We need to know what we're talking about when we talk about hope. And the problem is, and the reason is, that so many people think of hope in very woo terms, in very fuzzy terms. We talked about wishes as values. You wish for things, meaning you value them and you're actually going to take effort to get them. Well, a lot of people talk about wishes as whims, as hopes that have no backing. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. So I'm going to go to the Oxford Dictionary. Oxford Dictionary is a feeling of expectation and desire for a particular thing to happen. Oxford Dictionary's expectation of and desire for. Well, what's wrong with expectation of and desire for? That sounds like a reason to believe and values.
Yes.
From Merriam-Webster, to cherish a desire with anticipation. I want something to happen or be true, such as hopes for a promotion, hoping for the best. I hope so. I hope you have a good day.
Yes, I use that a lot, as a matter of fact. Hope you're doing well.
Is that a whim? Is that a groundless wish? Well, we all know. Well, maybe we don't know. That's why we're having the discussion. One more. Go to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is good on this. Link in the show notes, because it's actually got a few things to say that I want to talk about. First of all, quote, hope is an optimistic state of mind that is based on an expectation of positive outcomes with respect to events and circumstances in one's life or the world at large. As a verb, its definitions include, I'm still reading from Wikipedia, as a verb, its definitions include expect with confidence and to cherish a desire with anticipation. It is an anticipatory emotion. Mm-hmm. Among its opposites are dejection, hopelessness, and despair. And so the question becomes, is hope, is anticipation of positive outcomes rational? Well, are your hopes grounded in the facts of reality? You know, we tend to be a little suspicious of hope. We associate hope with faith. We take good concepts, belief, trust, confidence, optimism, courage, pride, ambition, and we see people using them to mean faith, blind faith, Pollyanna, pipe dreams, braggadocio, indifference, depression, apathy. But the actual opposites of hope, again, are hopelessness, pessimism, I would say determinism, cynicism, distrust, irrationality, and I'm going to come back to that. The opposite of hope is distrust and cynicism, and that is irrational. If your hopes are grounded, if you hope for a positive outcome based on an expectation and it's grounded in the facts of reality, well, cynics say, follow the money. You know, in trying to figure out what's going on with politics, I often say ideas matter. Ideas are primary. Even if your politician is only in it for the power or only in it for the money, it's ideas that make all that possible. And the cynics come back to me and say, follow the money. And in one regard, they're right. Because as successful investors know, and as recently mentioned by Yaron Burke on his show, in the market, in the stock market, and in other aspects of financial markets, optimism is the success strategy. Optimism is the winning strategy in every domain. Look at the stock market. Despite crashes, the market goes up. Eventually, the market goes up. Optimism is the winning strategy. And this is much broader than financial markets. Look at progress. And people will always say, you won't say this, I know you won't. That's why we love you. But people always say, Robert, you're just looking at technology. Of course, people invent stuff. The atlases create the internet. The atlases create your iPhone. The atlases create this, big flat screen television. All the technology that makes you think things are getting better. But outside of tech, which is still relatively free market, isn't everything else getting worse? And they immediately point to the culture war or politics. Except poverty has decreased. Mm-hmm. And not a little. Poverty has gone through the floor. It's estimated in less than 10 years now, there will not be poverty in any even semi-free country in the world. That problem has been solved. Food availability, which is why I brought up Happy Food Day, food availability has never been higher. Personal safety has never been higher, despite the news. And, there was a police shooting. There was I think the latest one, this terrible, terrible story, a rape on a commuter train. And, people are standing by, not stopping it from happening, taking cell phone pictures. Despite every news story you can find out there, cop shot another guy, or guy shot another cop, whatever it is, you have never been safer. And this is around the world. People have never been personally safer than they are right now. I could go on. Almost everything has improved, and not just a little, in orders of magnitude in the last 10, 25, 50 years. Success is possible, and more. Success occurs every day, all around you, all over the world. If you want to find protests, riots, BLM going crazy, cops shooting people, if you want to find bad news, you've got to look for it. For most of us, it ain't outside the door. I mean, we know which neighborhoods to avoid. I'm not saying bad things don't happen, but that's always been true.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Please.
So, and by the way, we have some really lovely comments, especially in YouTube.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Wow. Time is going quick, and I should have been in the comments already, but I know you'll help me with that. But
really,
what is your question?
My question is, why is it, okay, I kind of know the answer already, but, you have reporters out there, and you have, cultural critics and, all of that, the intelligentsia, the elite, however you want to put it. Why are they hanging on for dear life to any kind of rotten news that they can find?
Let me tell you.
I mean, it's like
two reasons
they're
for that.
They're hoping for the worst, in the worst kind of hope.
Yep, there are two reasons for that. As Gail Winan taught his reporters, if it bleeds, it leads. That line wasn't used in the Fountainhead, but good news isn't news. So one of the big news stories right now, and one of the signs of the coming apocalypse for the doomsayers out there, is the failure of the ports in California. The recent failure of one part of the global supply chain, the bottleneck of supply ships in Southern California, is a reminder that, one, things can go wrong, and two, prior to last month, they rarely went wrong. When was the last time Southern California had a large-scale failure of ports? Not that I've ever heard of. As I mentioned on our last show, this brings to mind the Evergreen Company's container ship Ever Given, which was stuck in the Suez Canal in March. Do you remember that story?
And all the funny memes.
Big boat got askew. It got sideways. You can't have a container ship go sideways in the Suez Canal. But it hit a sandbar, caused the front end to get stuck in place. The back end keeps coming around, and the ship gets stuck. And it took them, I don't even remember how long, it took them a month to unstick this container ship. And in the meantime, that means all of the other ships have got to go around Cape Hope, have got to go around Africa to get from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean, or wherever it is that their final destination was, going through the Suez Canal. Why was that a story? Well, it was a very big deal in shipping, but also that never happens. A very big deal, very unusual. The contingency plans and other workarounds were poor. Why? Why were plans so poor for handling that? And the answer is because that rarely happens, and that's the same reason it's news. Good news isn't news. So you don't realize, I don't realize, none of us realize how much good news there is, how normal success is, and how much reason there is to believe, how much reason there is to hope, rationally, that things will continue to improve. We have grounding for hope. So I encourage you to keep one eye on other news sources besides the news. And that's why I've included in the show notes links to Human Progress. If you've never gone there before, you need to. humanprogress.org. Links to Our World in Data, which, unsurprisingly, is ourworldindata.org. Don't go there now. The links will all be in the show notes posted right after the show. The Progress Network, progressnetwork.org. And read some non-dystopian authors. Take in your news, read your favorite columnist. You've got to know what's going wrong out there. We got to keep an eye on these people and fight them when necessary. You know what I mean by these people. That side, our side, all the sides. Anybody who considers themselves a side, scientists aren't sides. Business people aren't sides. Well, us and the competitors. Read some non-dystopian authors like Matt Ridley, the rational optimist, or Steven Pinker, Better Angels of Our Nature, or Michael Shermer, The Moral Arc, How Science Makes Us Better People. And I've linked to the article from the Ayn Rand Institute, Why the Future is Bright, from Yaron Brook. You read enough of this and you realize there's terrible things going on out there. But most people aren't trying to destroy the world. They're trying to earn a living. They're trying to take care of their families.
They're pretty decent people.
Yes.
Yes.
Far beyond the culture war and the politics of the day. There's the challenge of living a decent life. A fulfilling life, a good life. An extraordinary life. A life that is an end in itself. A life worth living. And hope is essential to that. It is your hope for some degree of success, for some degree of values that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's certainly what gets me out of the bed in the morning. And I have every hope and every reason to believe that I will have a good life. My hope is that you will do the same. Mm-hmm. But what I hope to do now is take a look at the chat, because I've been ignoring it, and I hate that because I love the chat. The chat is awesome.
Yes.
So what's going on in the chat? Because I think you've kept a better eye on it.
Yeah. So over on Facebook here we have Petya. Thanks again for the lovely cards you sent us.
Wow. Very cool.
It's so great.
Love it.
And Jim, we have he's guided by Facebook to one of our September episodes.
Wonderful.
Because the ghosts, I'm sure.
Oh yes, well, I think they hold up pretty well. I mean that might be presumptuous of me to say, or braggadocious of me to say, but
Jim says also, without giving spoilers, I think the title of Sophie's choice refers to the agonizing choice Sophie was forced to make just before she and her children were to board the train.
Yes. It is a story that takes place during Nazi Germany, and you can only imagine the kinds of choices people were faced with. You probably couldn't imagine the one in the film if you don't already know the plot. The point is that some choices, there's no good answers.
Yeah, and so over on YouTube, we have a whole party going on. We've got Bonnie and Jennifer. Jennifer's also on Facebook as well. And, we have LaBruz, hey there, and Scott. We have Chandler. We have Mary Aline. Just want to shout out to all you guys because it's so cool that you're on with us.
Well, not only that, but you got to talk to Jennifer earlier.
I did get to talk with Jennifer, as a matter of fact.
And I got to talk to Scott earlier.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
How cool is that? That's so cool.
We're engaged. We are connected. That's right.
We have the best friends.
We hang with the beautiful people.
Yeah, so, well, let's see. In the chat here, so I posted,
Yes.
The questions, what are you hoping for? And do you have confidence that it is a rational goal? Please share. And so LeBruce says, I'm struggling with my malevolent universe premise. I love to listen to this type of discussion. I want to have a more benevolent and hopeful sense of life.
Good.
Well, you've come to the right place.
Yes, and we're focused on hope in terms of positive expectations for the future, but we have done whole episodes on benevolence and optimism. And
yes.
As Jim suggests, I think they hold up pretty well.
Yeah.
Go back to our previous episodes. So you might look that up on YouTube or Facebook.
Yeah, and Scott says we can still, even despite all the challenges and cruddy people in the world, we can still be happy warriors, even if the left, or I should say, or the right, says their victory is inevitable. And so Chandler hopes to go into space, just like Captain James T. Kirk, aka William Shatner.
Yep.
And and Marilyn and I were talking about going up as well, and I want to be. I said that I want to be 91 so that I can beat out William Shatner, who is 90. And then she said, 91 is too close. I'm shooting for 101.
There's some sad stuff about that. But first of all, Scott does mention Only Murders in the Building, which I still need to see, but it is on my to watch list.
Yeah.
He also mentions the Kobayashi Maru, which was in Star Trek, it was a plot point for Captain Kirk during training, where they give you a no-win situation just to find out how you will handle it. And again, no right answers other than, do you handle yourself well under that kind of pressure?
Right.
And I think you can actually go further with that, and with trolley problems, above and beyond just, there are no right answers. There was a discussion about this. I'm going to save that for a future episode, but I do think some people perform better even when nobody should be blamed. We'll get into that. Courage is a thing.
And
Yes.
LeBruce says, I like to focus on what my favorite artists are creating and the new amazing tools and innovations in my industry. All the bad things are just a small part of life.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's written in my notes, although I didn't write it out in detail, to mention music and art and film, because it's very easy to look at technology to say, well, the iPhone was just 12 years ago. So in terms of rational expectations, in other words, in terms of things to hope for, rationally, it's easy to look at technology and say, well, in 12 years, there will be something. Maybe it'll be 8 years, maybe it'll be 15 years, but there will be something as completely unexpected and unprecedented as the iPhone. Because the iPhone wasn't just a new cell phone. We already had new cell phones out there. And the iPhone wasn't just a new phone that could send and receive email and do kind of internet-y things, because we had Blackberries and we had other phones out there. No, the iPhone did everything with the kind of infrastructure that changed everything. You would not have had the Android operating system move in the direction it did without iOS. This was a game changer. And 2 years later, 2010, you had the iPad. If you were in computers at the time, you knew tablets were just, there were a few use cases for tablets. Okay, we had tablets before the iPad. We didn't have anything like that. We didn't have anything that was a 1/4 inch thick with this big screen it was a little miracle. I thought the iPod Touch was more miraculous. Anyway, enough about the technology. The point is, 10 years from now, something else is going to disrupt everything again. It's going to happen. But I love that you brought up music and film and art, because you're going to see the same thing there. Now, if you're old like me, you're like, oh, there's no good new music. Except that is so wrong. There is so much good new music coming out right now. If you actually watch television shows, Old America's Got Talent or The Voice or whatever contemporary shows you've got now that are showcasing not just new artists but up and comers, There are amazing people out there with amazing talents, and it is so inspiring. Fortunately, as a guitar player, I read guitar magazines, so I still will come across an article that says, oh, this is new, but I might enjoy it anyway. You know, the old man syndrome. It just doesn't end.
Man.
I'm kidding. I should say that I'm kidding. Otherwise, people will say, "Oh, is this an old guy? Why would I listen to this old guy?"
This old man put in 200 miles on his bike this month, and actually,
I'm
the
not
month,
done yet.
The month is only it's still the 24th. It's not even the end of the month.
Well, November and December are going to be hard, so I got to get a little bit ahead. I'm going to try to. I got to average 200 miles a month for the next 2 months to get in my 2,000 miles for the year. Anyway, the point is, it's not. That's my point. It's not just technology. It's food production. It's energy production. Hell, Ford and maybe General Motors, but I know people who work at Ford are producing electric vehicles that make sense.
Yeah. It actually isn't a waste. That actually makes
sense. Now, we've talked about electric vehicles. They were pushed ahead of their time. The government should never have been subsidizing that. Tesla, as much as we appreciate Elon Musk, should never have gotten the subsidies that they got. It takes what should have been a heroic effort and has given you reason to be suspicious about it. Even some of the space stuff, it's like, would that have even happened without... But Ford Motor Company is actually producing EVs that make sense. We will eventually catch up with this stuff. Technology just doesn't stop, and you're seeing it in engineering as well as in electronics and computers and internet and information. You're seeing it in art. You're seeing it in music. You're seeing it in film. Great movies are still being made. It was so heartening to see the fans of Dune actually like the new version, or the version of the film that's out now. I guess there was one previously that was just a disappointment. It just doesn't stop. There will be setbacks. There won't be another 9/11. It will be something else like that, something else as bad, but wholly different. There will be wars. There will be deaths. There will be violence. There will be crime. There will be political setbacks. There will be all of these things that we've seen in the last 10 years, but that we also saw 30 years ago, and people as old as me saw 40 years ago. Except when I was young, it wasn't called environmentalism or climate change. It was called ecology. And the ecology movement, well, read Ayn Rand. Read The New Left, the anti-industrial revolution. Everything old is new again. It's not that Greta isn't a threat. It's that we will deal with it. Just like it's not that transgenderism is not a problem. It's that we will sort it out, same way we sorted out gay marriage, which everybody thought would be the end of marriage and the ruining of the sacredness of marriage. We will figure out the right answers to these things. And it may well be that the people in cultural leadership right now are all wrong. We will get to what's right 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 15 years from now. And then we will look back on it and we will say, oh, wow. Gay marriage didn't ruin marriage or ruin society. It was just something we had to figure out how to integrate it, sort it all out. Now it's all good.
Yeah, well, we have a lovely another comment here from Jim. Thank you so much, Jim. He says, an exception to dystopian literature being dark and depressing is Ayn Rand's Anthem. I'm rereading that right now as a kind of antidote to the dark mood reading Dostoevsky's Demons put me in. Ooh. That book is a kind of pre-dystopian novel set in the author's time, but showing the psychological and social conditions necessary for the future Soviet Union to come into being. So yeah, like psychological and social conditions necessary for mass death.
Yeah, well, but Anthem, on the other hand, is enormously inspiring.
Yes, it is.
It does have, minor spoiler alert, but it does have a happier ending than We the Living. The other, like Dostoevsky, We the Living was set in current times and is only dystopian to the extent that what was happening was a dystopian. I guess that's not dystopian, it's just I don't know what the word is for that. Anyway, given what was actually happening in Soviet Union at the time, minor spoiler alert, not a happy ending. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. So yes, Anthem is far more not just inspiring, but cheerful at the end.
Much more joyous.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I kind of wish that she had written a little bit more, like what happens and,
After part 12?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can see that too. You can do, what do they call it? Fan fiction. You can make up your own part 13 for Anthem. Incidentally, part 11, I have read parts of that on the show before, but it's hard to do without getting choked up. So good. Oh my gosh. So, yes.
And Mary Aline chimes in. She says, when I read books from the 17th and 18th centuries and what those poor people had to eat, I shake my head.
So
then
right.
Then I smile and think about the... wait, is that bologna or is that...
bolognese.
Bolognese, sorry. I made last night. You'll have to send me the recipe, Mary Aline.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And yes, there were, fancy foods, but 300 years ago, except only fancy people had access to them.
Yeah.
And said about the peasantry, let them eat cake. Not that they could have or afford cake. So, yes, it is. We live in miraculous times.
Yes.
And again, our biggest problem is we have access to too much good stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So Jennifer and I talked earlier today, and she talked about, we talked about hope, and sometimes I kind of connected it to the Serenity Prayer, and also Clint Eastwood's lovely quote, "A man has to know his limitations," from Dirty Harry. There's only so much you can do in your life. Like for me, as a 5'6" woman who is not terribly young, I can never be a basketball star. That's just something I can't do, as a matter of fact. And it's not irrational for me to say I have limitations. Would you support me? Thank you. But yeah, and sometimes life presents terrible things, and you really can't do anything about it. And you really don't have. I mean, you have hope perhaps at some point, and you need hope. So that kind of got me into some fairly good articles here. First of all, let's see here. There's really quickly here, and we'll post this into the show notes, I think, this particular one. It says, and I like how they put this, when you are feeling in a low funk, but a funk is a depressed mood, because it's a word that, I don't know, I guess I really wasn't introduced to until I met Robert. It's true.
When you're in a funk.
When you're in a funk.
When you are feeling hopeless.
And it says, try these strategies to raise your vibes.
Raise your vibes.
Okay. So number one, consider all the amazing things you've done in your life. That's something, oh my gosh, I need to do more of. And also I need to kind of reframe the things that I've done. I run a 5-day-a-week online exercise class called Couch to Standing Workout. Look it up, Couch to Standing Workout, on Facebook. And honestly, I run a 5 days out of the week an exercise class. I've never done this before. I'm not actually an exercise trainer or anything like that, but I know these things. I do them. I show people them, and people come back and they really love them. And it's basically for friends, and they show up. I show up. It's a lovely spiritual trade that we're having. But really, I've never thought that I would actually do this in my entire life. So all these amazing things I've done. Surround yourself with optimism. Obviously surround yourself with people who see things optimistically. The whole idea of turning challenges into opportunities, which sounds kind of woo to me, but you can do that if you work at it, I suppose. Allow inspiration in. Read books, listen to music, all that stuff. Spend time in nature, another way to do that. Be courageous, take those first steps. even if you think the goal is really, really challenging and daunting, take those first steps. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that will bolster your self-esteem, will bolster your a more benevolent sense of life, will give you confidence, will make you feel a lot less malevolent. And yeah, and there's more, if you just look up like nurturing hope and, how to be hopeful, there's actually some really good things. And I should also mention the SMART goals. You've probably heard of this, but let me reiterate. It's an acronym for specific, measurable, action-oriented, and realistic, and then finally time-bound. So it has to have some kind of deadline. SMART goals. And that goes into, I'm sure Robert wants to talk a little bit about how to ground your hopes and your dreams and your aspirations and expectations in reality.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing that for us. The point is that when you are talking about hopes for your own future,
and I have a list of those, by the way.
They need to be as grounded as your hopes for, my hopes for technology or art or film or anything else that we know is going to continue to get better in the future. There will be setbacks. I don't need to keep saying that. But amazing things are going to happen, and our own amazing hopes for our own amazing future needs to be equally well grounded. It needs legs so that you can have that confidence that... So, for example, you said, well, you're given your height and all that about being a basketball star, and Scott responds, you'll never be a basketball star with that attitude. And he's absolutely right. So, got to work on that.
And Marilyn, thank you. Thank you for showing up for the class. And yes, that's so amazing. And
yes. Well, and Jim says, like you're suggesting, Robert, hope and faith are not the same thing. Hope is rooted in reality, even if a person is mistaken about reality, but faith is rooted in fantasy. Make believe because a person wants to believe in something without evidence for it. Yeah, and again, what I keep coming back to, because we had a discussion about trust. Trust? Yeah, trust. Trust is a form of knowledge. What do you mean trust is a form of knowledge? Trust is knowing somebody that you have reason to know, or at least to have confidence of what somebody will do in the future. Trust is knowing a person so well that it is rational to assume they will continue to act based on what you know about them. And hope is the same thing, but in regard to reality. You know so well what the conditions are, what can be expected in the future, that you have grounds for hope. Your hope has legs. And when Jim talks about faith, I'm sure he's talking about it in the philosophical sense. Not in the sense that you would tell your kid, I have faith in you, meaning I have reason to believe you'll succeed. But in the sense of blind faith, and the dictionary definition of faith, belief in the absence of or in contradiction to the evidence. And that's absolutely right. It's why I always spend a little time on definitions. I know that can seem to, that slows us down at the beginning, but you got to know what you're talking about with these words, and especially in your own life, because it's so easy, and I see the cynics take words like hope and say, no, that's woo. You should never have hope. Optimism is too woo, benevolence is too woo, and it's really important to ground this stuff because it could be really woo, because there are people out there who are saying, gee, I hope things get better, and they aren't doing anything about it. Or saying, gee, I hope I succeed at this, and they have no reason to believe it. So yes, by all means, ground those terms. Use rational definitions. And that's what we are at least trying to do. So, real quick from the Wikipedia article. They mention hope theory. And the psychologist Snyder, I forget his first name, it's in the link in the show notes. As a specialist in positive psychology, Snyder studied how hope and forgiveness can impact several aspects of life, such as health, work, education, and personal meaning, and postulated that there are three main things that make up hope or hopeful thinking. And the three things he mentioned are goals, pathways and agency. This is your grounding, and this is going to be part of my homework. Goals, approaching life in a goal-oriented way. Well, that seems pretty straightforward. Have goals. Pathways, finding different ways to achieve your goals. Well, that's giving your plans legs. Pathways are plans. Pathways are ways to get where you want to go. And finally, agency, believing that you can instigate change and achieve these goals. Agency in that sense is not just belief in free will, but self-confidence. Having achieved something, anything in the past, you know you're capable of achievement. Goals, pathways, agency. I like that. Mm-hmm. So, Amy, what are your goals, or what are your hopes for the future?
See. I think we have an unplugging thing going on here because my laptop is dying.
Oh, here. You can borrow this from the production machine.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. That's very lovely of you.
Yes.
If it will stretch over.
And then our podcast will crash if we continue it for 2 more hours. So
okay, I think that's better. Thank you very much.
I don't think we're going to go another 2 hours. I think 5 minutes is kind of the limit there.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so sorry about that, guys. For those who are watching, I got up from the couch, or in our studio, I should say, and I think that my computer's locking for some reason. Well, let me just tell you from memory what my goals are.
Oh, actually, it looks like this is affecting the podcast, too.
Here, go ahead.
You may need to put that back. Okay, sorry about the technical challenges there, folks.
I'm going to throw my computer here out the window.
Yeah, where'd your power supply go to?
Anyway, so I am certainly very much looking forward to, being even healthier next year, 5 years from now, of course, next week.
Power strip might have shut off.
Yeah, probably.
Switch is knocked.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. No, I will not. So,
okay.
Of course, I'm doing the couch to standing workout, and I'm continuing with flamenco dance, with all this stuff, and I know that, eventually I'm going to be even healthier next year. Even as time goes on and my DNA breaks down, I'm going to actually be healthier next year and even 5 years from now, because I've gained a lot of really wonderful habits in the last 2 years.
Couch to standing workout's been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
5 days a week.
Yes,
people need to get on board with that. The only surprising thing about that is that more people aren't on board with it. We've got some great people joining us in the mornings and the afternoons that takes place. I lost an S there. And we need more. We need more people on board. Very cool. What other ambitions and hopes do you have?
So Robert and I, we went to see a very, very silly play last night, a musical called Spam-A-Lot.
Spam-A-Lot. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that, even if they haven't seen it.
And so it was great fun, and actually 2 of our friends, good friends, Mark and Kayla, actually starred in it.
Wow.
And it was so amazing, and I thought to myself, you know what, I can dance, I can kind of sing, at least a little bit, and I can act, because I've done that before, and I can memorize lines, because I've done that before. Why don't I just join theater?
Theater? Is it time for us to get into the theater?
Maybe, yeah. Heck, we could even do little skits and post them up on robertnasir.com, where by the way, you can actually find links to PayPal and Patreon if you want to go ahead and support us. That would be very lovely of you. And go to our YouTube channel and give us a like and share this out and into the world. That would be really lovely. But yeah, no, I think that'd be great fun.
Theater.
Even just for a year. Just to see, or do it for 6 months, or do it for one program and see how we like it. That'd be fun.
Give me a head with hair, long, beautiful hair. Okay, maybe we could find a production of Hair and be in that.
You'd be a natural, total shoo-in.
So silly. But no, that would be great fun. I have not been on the stage since grade school, when I played Huckleberry Finn in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
Yes, very nice.
Yes, good role for me.
I played Blanche Dubois in a
Streetcar called Desire?
Streetcar Named Desire, yeah.
I think I had the better role. Although I'm sure you did a great job with it.
That was a long, long time ago.
So I want to know more about your hopes.
Yes.
Share them with us. If you haven't already put them in the chat, put them in there. Once the show wraps up, go to the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group. Share them with the group. My intention this week, my homework for this week, is to revisit my value hierarchy in the context of my hopes. And what I want to do is test each of them against that idea from positive psychology, that to increase your hopefulness about the future, and of course what I'm concerned about is increasing my success, is make sure that my goals, my pathways, and my agency are fully aligned, that they are firing on all cylinders. So again, in regard to developing a more hopeful attitude about the future, a more hopeful perspective, make sure you have goals and that you're approaching your values in a goal-oriented way. Make sure that your pathways, your ways of achieving your goals, are robust. They talk about finding different ways to achieve your goals. So make sure that they are robust. One good way to do that is make sure you've got more than one way to get where you want to go, so that roadblocks are easier to deal with. And the third element that they list is agency. Believing that you can instigate change and achieve these goals, which for me means looking back on past successes. And not only does that convince me that I can achieve success again, but it also gives me clues on the best ways to get there. There was a podcast, I think it was the most recent Tim Ferriss podcast. He talks to a gal, I forget her name, Diana somebody, and she talks about how you can question your own beliefs, figure out the opposite of your beliefs, convince yourself that those are possibly true as well. It was very woo, and I could see why it works. But for me, it wouldn't work because there's a real contradiction behind this method. What I want is not to convince myself that my limiting beliefs have alternatives that might also be true. What I want to do is I want to figure out what my limiting beliefs are, challenge them, figure out truer beliefs. I don't think you need to undercut your confidence or certainty to do that. So I'm going to be revisiting my goals, my intentions for the next year, 5 years, 10 years, in terms of goals, pathways, and agency. You are welcome to join me too. Again, a link to that Wikipedia article on hope, which also includes that, is in the show notes. My promise for you is that if you do just a few of the things that we talked about, if you look at hope as rational, positive expectations for the future, if you figure out why they're rational, if you find their grounding, if you give them legs, you will have a more hopeful attitude about the future. If you apply that to your own goals, your own values, your own desires for your own life, you can do the same with all of your values. And that's what I'm going to work on. That's what I'm going to work on this week.
Yeah.
I didn't do a Post-it note for the week just because I was a bit rushed, but I think I'll do that. I will put down goals, pathways, and agency, and the tips on that on my Post-it note for the week to remind myself of that. Move forward, go ahead, try to detect it.
It's not too late.
To quote the philosopher's Devo. And I hope that you find yourself feeling hope as we wrap up the discussion and we move into the season of hope. We've got Halloween next week.
Yeah.
We've got our wedding anniversary, a national holiday someday.
Yep.
Right after that, the same week, we have Thanksgiving. The next month, we have Christmas. And then, best of all, the new year, when we can start counting days again and figure out what happened right in 2021. What do we want to have happen next in 2022? Thank you for joining us on this discussion of hope. I hope you hope. I hope you see that hope is a rational concept, crucial concept. Nobody really can avoid it. As John Anderson and the band Yes say, without hope, you cannot start the day. Thank you so much. As always, show notes will be posted for this episode. Everything we talked about, all the links, all the interesting stuff within 5-10 minutes after the show. If you have suggestions for future episodes, things you would like us to talk about, things you would like to talk to us about in the chat, go to the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group, write them up, put some comments in there, start a conversation. Let's do that. As Amy mentioned earlier, if you would like to support the show, and thank you to those of you who already do,
Yes.
cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. If you want to be one of the beautiful people, the lucky people, the special people who are in our Patreon or using our PayPal, Patreon once a month, PayPal just for a one-time contribution, those links are at robertnasir.com. You can do that thing. And thank you for joining us. Thanks. As always, we went a little long. I think we went a little over 5 minutes. But I did promise that I would wrap this up. I did promise a bit of hope for each of you. I hope you got it. Hope you got that message. If not, talk to me on Facebook, talk to me on Twitter, get us on the social networks, continue to engage. We will see you next Sunday at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Those of you who are following the Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube channel will also see you Thursday at 5 o'clock. Otherwise, in the meantime, we hope, and by hope I mean we have confidence of a positive outcome. We hope that you have an outstanding week. We wish you success. We wish you hope. And as always,